The wrench slipped from her oil-stained fingers and clattered to the concrete floor of Fowler's garage. For just a moment, Loisa Fowler's hands trembled, not from the cold Oregon morning, but from the sound that had just echoed across the quiet town of Cedar Falls. 3 black SUVs with government plates were pulling into her parking lot, their engines running with the kind of precision that made her blood run cold. The customers sipping coffee at Murphy's Diner across the street had no idea they were about to witness the unraveling of the most carefully guarded secret in their small town. For 8 years they brought their pickup trucks, family sedans, and farm equipment to the woman everyone knew simply as Lou, the quiet mechanic who could fix anything with wheels and never asked questions about late-night emergency repairs. What they didn't know was that those same hands had once disarmed bombs in Afghanistan, eliminated high-value targets in Syria, and extracted diplomats from hostile territory in places that didn't exist on any official map. Loisa Fowler wasn't just a mechanic. She was one of the most lethal operatives the U.S. Special Forces had ever produced. And now, her past had finally found her. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if the story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. Cedar Falls, Oregon sat in the shadow of the Cascade Mountains like a secret whispered between the forest and the sky. Population 3,847, according to the faded welcome sign, though most locals figured that number hadn't been updated since the Clinton administration. It was the kind of place where everyone knew everyone else's business, except when it came to Loisa Fowler. She'd arrived on a gray October morning 8 years ago, driving a battered Ford pickup with Nevada plates and carrying nothing but a toolbox, a duffel bag, and enough cash to buy the abandoned Texaco station on the edge of town. Within 6 months, she'd transformed the crumbling building into Cedar Falls' only full-service garage. And within a year, she'd earned something more valuable than money: the trust of people who'd lived their entire lives suspicious of outsiders. Loisa was 34 now, though the lines around her dark brown eyes and the careful way she moved suggested someone who'd packed more living into those years than most people managed in twice that time. Her black hair was always pulled back in a practical ponytail, and she had a habit of wiping her hands on the same red bandana that she kept tucked in her back pocket, a ritual that seemed to ground her whenever the world got too loud. The garage itself reflected her personality, efficient, organized, and revealing nothing unnecessary about its owner. Tools hung in precise arrangements on pegboard walls. Parts were cataloged and stored with military precision. The waiting area contained exactly 4 mismatched chairs, a coffee pot that always had fresh brew, and a small television that stayed tuned to local news unless someone specifically asked her to change the channel. What the customers didn't notice were the subtle modifications that turned Fowler's garage into something more than an automotive repair shop. The security cameras disguised as weather sensors, the reinforced steel plates hidden behind the decorative wood paneling, the emergency escape route that led from the office through a concealed tunnel to the tree line behind the building, and most importantly, the hidden compartment beneath, the hydraulic lift where Loisa kept items that had nothing to do with fixing engines. She'd learned to read people, the way other mechanics read diagnostic codes. Mayor Patricia Hendricks brought her Buick in every 6 weeks, not because it needed maintenance, but because her husband had died the previous spring and she was lonely. Sheriff Tom Bradley always scheduled his patrol car's service during his lunch break so he could sit in the waiting area and complain about budget cuts and departmental politics. His way of processing the stress of keeping law and order in a town that was slowly dying as young people moved away for better opportunities. Then there was Father Michael Santos from St. Catharines, who drove a 20-year-old Honda that ran perfectly but brought it in whenever he needed someone to listen without judgment. And Sarah Chun, the high school principal, whose SUV somehow required attention every time she was dealing with difficult parents or budget crises. Loisa had become Cedar Falls' unofficial therapist, the kind of person who fixed more than just engines. She listened to divorce proceedings over oil changes, offered practical advice during brake inspections, and somehow always knew exactly when someone needed a free repair. Because money was tight that month. The townspeople had theories about her. Of course, some whispered that she'd fled an abusive marriage in Las Vegas. The Nevada plates and the way she instinctively scanned every room she entered supported that narrative. Others suspected she was hiding from gambling debts or tax problems, pointing to her insistence on cash transactions and her reluctance to discuss her past. Old Pete Morrison, who spent most afternoons nursing a beer at the Rusty Anchor Tavern, swore she'd been in the military. He'd catch glimpses of the way she stood when the flag went up at the elementary school, spine straight, eyes focused, with an alertness that spoke of someone trained to notice threats. But when anyone asked directly, Loisa would just smile and change the subject, her deflection so smooth that people forgot they'd even asked. The truth was more complex than any of their theories. Loisa Fowler had indeed been in the military, but not in any capacity that appeared on official records. For 6 years, she'd been part of a classified special forces unit, known only as Grey Wolf operators, who handled situations too sensitive for regular military channels, too dangerous for CIA assets, and too morally ambiguous for anyone who expected to sleep well at night. She'd learned to kill silently in a dozen different ways. She could build explosive devices from household chemicals, hack secure communication networks with equipment that fit in a backpack, and speak 4 languages well enough to pass for a native speaker. Her specialty had been deep cover infiltration, disappearing into hostile territory for months at a time, gathering intelligence while maintaining identity so convincing that even trained counterintelligence officers couldn't detect the deception. But her most valuable skill hadn't been tactical. It had been her ability to become invisible in plain sight, to blend so seamlessly into any environment that people simply forgot to notice her. In war zones, that talent had kept her alive. In Cedar Falls, it had given her something she'd never expected to find: peace. The transformation hadn't been easy. The first year had been filled with nightmares that left her sheets soaked with sweat and reflexes that nearly got her arrested when a customer dropped a wrench too close to her position. She'd installed motion sensors around her property and slept with a loaded pistol under her pillow for 18 months before finally accepting that the only people hunting her were memories. Gradually, the hypervigilance had faded into simple caution. The habit of cataloging exits and potential weapons became background noise rather than constant anxiety. She learned to appreciate the rhythm of small-town life, the predictability of regular customers, the satisfaction of solving mechanical problems that had clear solutions, and the gentle gossip that flowed through the community like a slow river carrying news of births, deaths, and minor scandals. Her workshop became a sanctuary where the only battles were against stubborn bolts and corroded connections. She found unexpected joy in the honesty of mechanical work problems that could be diagnosed, repaired, and tested with tools rather than instinct. There was something profoundly healing about spending her days fixing things instead of breaking them. The closest she'd come to revealing her true nature was during the ice storm 3 winters ago. Highway 20 had been closed for 4 days, and the town's emergency generator had failed during the second night, leaving the medical clinic without power. While other residents huddled in their homes waiting for county maintenance crews, Loisa had quietly slipped out into the storm, working through the night in conditions that would have challenged trained survival experts. She'd jerry-rigged a power solution using parts from her garage and techniques she'd learned during classified operations in Eastern Europe. By morning, the clinic was running normally, and Dr. Elizabeth Warner was calling Loisa a hero. When asked how she'd managed such a complex repair in those conditions, Loisa had simply shrugged and said she'd gotten lucky, but Sheriff Bradley had noticed things others missed. The way she'd moved through this storm with confidence that suggested extensive cold weather training. The precision of her improvised electrical work. Most tellingly, the fact that she'd somehow acquired detailed knowledge of the clinic's power requirements and backup systems without ever having worked on them before. He'd started paying closer attention after that, noting the small inconsistencies that most people overlooked. The way she could estimate distances and elevations with uncanny accuracy. Her habit of positioning herself where she could observe both entrances when sitting in restaurants. The fact that she never seemed surprised by sudden noises, as if some part of her was always listening for trouble. More than once, he'd considered running her fingerprints through federal databases, but something had always stopped him. Cedar Falls was a better place with Loisa Fowler in it. She'd helped his deputies learn basic vehicle maintenance that saved the department thousands of dollars. She'd quietly repaired vehicles for families going through hard times, often refusing payment. And during the wildfire evacuations 2 summers ago, she'd worked around the clock to keep emergency vehicles running when every hour mattered. Whatever secret she was hiding, Sheriff Bradley had decided they belonged to someone who'd earned the right to keep them. As Loisa worked beneath the hood of Mrs. Patterson's ancient Chevrolet that October morning, she felt the familiar satisfaction of mechanical problem-solving. The engine had been making a concerning rattling noise that 3 other mechanics had failed to diagnose, but Loisa had identified the issue within minutes, a worn timing chain that was days away from complete failure. She was lost in the meditative rhythm of disassembly when her peripheral vision caught movement that didn't belong in Cedar Falls' predictable patterns. 3 vehicles moving in formation, their occupants too alert, their arrival too coordinated to be coincidence. Loisa's hands continued working on the engine, but every instinct from her Grey Wolf training was suddenly online, processing threat assessments and escape routes with the automatic efficiency of someone who'd survived by trusting such warnings. The black SUVs pulled into her parking lot with the kind of precision that spoke of federal law enforcement or military operations. Through the garage's windows, she could see figures emerging with the coordinated movement of a tactical team, trying to look casual. After 8 years of carefully constructed anonymity, Loisa Fowler's past had finally caught up with her. And as she reached for a wrench with hands that were no longer quite steady, she realized that the quiet mechanic who'd fixed Cedar Falls cars was about to disappear forever. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. The lead agent stepped out of the first SUV with the measured confidence of someone accustomed to being the most dangerous person in any room. He was tall, lean, with the kind of military bearing that never fully disappeared, even in civilian clothes. His dark suit was expensive but practical, tailored to conceal the shoulder holster that Loisa's trained eye immediately identified. Behind him, 5 more operatives emerged in practice sequence, 2 from each of the remaining vehicles, plus a driver who stayed behind the wheel of each SUV. Their positioning wasn't random. They'd automatically created overlapping fields of observation and fire, blocking all obvious escape routes from the garage while maintaining the appearance of a routine government visit. Loisa recognized the tactical formation immediately. These weren't FBI agents or investigators. This was a Grey Wolf extraction team, and she was their target. She continued working on Mrs. Patterson's Chevrolet, her movements deliberate and calm while her mind shifted into operational mode. 8 years of civilian life hadn't dulled the reflexes that had kept her alive in places where a moment's hesitation meant death. She cataloged the team's equipment, noted their communication earpieces, and mentally mapped the garage's interior for maximum tactical advantage. The lead agent approached the open bay door, his footsteps measured and confident. When he spoke, his voice carried the authority of someone who expected immediate compliance. Ms. Fowler? I'm Agent Marcus Kane, Department of Defense Special Activities Division. We need to speak with you. Loisa didn't look up from the engine compartment. Shop's closed for lunch, she said evenly. Come back in an hour and I'll take a look at whatever you're driving. Kane stepped closer, and she could sense rather than see his slight smile. I think you know why we're here, Sergeant Chun. The name hit like a physical blow, but Loisa's hands never paused in their work. Sergeant Lisa Chun had died in a classified operation 8 years ago, her record sealed and her existence officially erased. The woman who'd emerged from that operation had been Rachel Torres, then later Loisa Fowler, each identity carefully constructed and legally documented. You've got the wrong person, she said, finally straightening up and turning to face Kane. Name's Loisa Fowler. Been running this garage for 8 years. Got the paperwork to prove it. Kane produced a tablet from his jacket, swiping to display a series of photographs. Even from her position near the hydraulic lift, Loisa could see images of herself from various angles around Cedar Falls surveillance photos, taken with telephoto lenses over an extended period. Impressive transformation, Kane acknowledged. The facial reconstruction surgery was top-tier work. Changed the bone structure just enough to fool facial recognition software, but not enough to look artificial. The hair color, contact lenses, even the way you carry yourself completely different from Sergeant Lisa Kien's military records. He swiped to another image, a classified personnel photo from her Grey Wolf days. The woman in the picture was younger, harder, with the 1,000-yard stare of someone who'd seen too much violence in too many places. But the bone structure around the eyes was unmistakably similar. However, Kane continued, certain behavioral patterns are harder to disguise. The way you automatically check vehicle undercarriages for explosive devices. Your habit of never sitting with your back to an entrance. The fact that you installed military-grade security around a civilian automotive shop. Loisa wiped her hands on her red bandana, buying time while she processed the situation. Kane's presence meant that Grey Wolf hadn't been disbanded as she'd been told. Worse, it meant they'd been actively hunting former operatives, the kind of systematic cleanup that only happened when operations had been compromised or political winds had shifted. Interesting theory, she said. But I'm just a mechanic who's careful about security. Lot of expensive equipment in here, and Cedar Falls doesn't exactly have a robust police presence. From the corner of her eye, she noticed movement across the street. Sheriff Bradley had emerged from Murphy's Diner and was observing the scene with the casual interest of a lawman who'd learned to recognize trouble. His hand rested near his service weapon, not threatening, but ready. Kane followed her gaze and smiled thinly. Local law enforcement won't be a factor in this conversation, Sergeant. We have federal jurisdiction, and this is a matter of national security. What exactly do you think I've done? Loisa asked, genuinely curious about their operational justification. Kane swiped to a new set of images on his tablet. Satellite photos showing what appeared to be a rural training facility. 6 months ago, someone with very specialized skills established a training camp in the mountains outside Bend. Advanced tactical instruction, weapons training, counter-surveillance techniques, the kind of curriculum that only gets taught in classified military programs. The images showed obstacle courses, shooting ranges, and structures designed for close-quarters combat training. Loisa studied them with professional interest, noting the sophisticated design and expensive equipment involved. Someone's been teaching civilians military tactics, King continued. Specifically, tactics developed by Grey Wolf for deep cover operations. We have reason to believe that someone is you. Loisa almost laughed. The accusation was so far from her reality that it took effort to maintain a serious expression. For 8 years, her only students had been local teenagers learning basic automotive repair through a program she'd established with the high school. Agent Kane, she said carefully, I haven't left Cedar Falls except for parts runs to Portland. In 3 years. My idea of advanced training involves teaching kids how to change oil without making a mess. But even as she spoke, Loisa's mind was working through the implications. Someone had been running unauthorized training operations using gray wolf techniques. Someone with access to classified methodology and expensive equipment. Someone who might be using her former identity as cover for their activities. Kane studied. Her reaction with the cold assessment of a professional interrogator. The training camp was abandoned 2 weeks ago, but we found something interesting in the main building. He swiped to a final image, a wall covered with photographs and tactical diagrams. In the center was a picture of Sergeant Lisa Chun in full combat gear. Someone's been using your reputation, Sergeant. The question is whether they're doing it with your knowledge and consent, or whether you've become a liability that needs to be eliminated. The weight of the situation settled over Loisa like a familiar darkness. She'd spent 8 years building a life based on the promise that her Grey Wolf service was over, that she'd earned the right to disappear into civilian anonymity. But someone had been trading on her legend, using her operational history to recruit and train unauthorized forces. I need to see those files, she said quietly. Kane's expression shifted slightly, as if he'd been waiting for exactly that response. That's not how this works, Sergeant. You're coming with us for a debriefing. Full interrogation, polygraph examination, complete psychological evaluation. We need to determine your level of involvement and current threat assessment. And if I refuse, then we arrest you under the Espionage Act for unauthorized disclosure of classified military techniques. You disappear into federal custody, and Loisa Fowler simply vanishes from Cedar Falls without explanation. The threat was clear and credible. Grey Wolf operated outside normal military channels, which meant they also operated outside normal legal protections. Kane's team could make her disappear with paperwork that would satisfy any official inquiry. But 8 years of civilian life had given Loisa something she'd never possessed during her military service: roots. People in Cedar Falls depended on her, trusted her, considered her part of their community. The thought of simply vanishing without explanation felt like a betrayal of everything she'd built. I need 10 minutes to secure the shop, she said. Kane checked his watch. 5 minutes. My team maintains perimeter security while you close up. As Loisa moved through the familiar routine of shutting down the garage, her mind raced through possibilities. Someone had been impersonating her operational methods, possibly recruiting and training civilians for unknown purposes. The timing suggested this had been planned for months, maybe years, long enough to establish credible operations while building the case against her. She locked Mrs. Patterson's Chevrolet keys in the office safe and left a note explaining that she'd been called away on a family emergency. It was thin cover, but it would buy time before people started asking uncomfortable questions. As she gathered her personal items, Loisa's hand brushed against the hidden panel beneath her desk where she kept emergency supplies from her Grey Wolf. Days, false identification, encrypted communication devices, cash, and weapons, everything needed for rapid extraction and evasion. Kane was watching her carefully, but he hadn't moved to search the office. Either he was supremely confident in his team's perimeter security, or he wanted to see what she would do when given the opportunity to run. Ready, she announced, emerging from the office with nothing but her jacket and truck keys. Kane gestured toward the lead SUV. We'll be more comfortable in our vehicle. As they walked across the parking lot, Loisa caught Sheriff Bradley's eye. He'd moved closer, ostensibly checking his patrol car, but actually positioning himself to intervene if necessary. She gave him the slightest shake of her head, a signal that she was going voluntarily and didn't want civilian law enforcement getting involved in federal business. But as Kane opened the SUV's rear door, Loisa noticed something that changed everything. One of the operatives standing by the second vehicle had a distinctive scar across his knuckles, the kind of mark left by specialized training equipment, used in only one place. She'd seen that scar before, 8 years ago, in the Grey Wolf facility where Sergeant Lisa Chun had officially died. The operative watching her now had been part of the extraction team that had supposedly eliminated all evidence of her existence, which meant Kane's operation wasn't about investigating unauthorized training camps. It was about finishing a job that had been left incomplete 8 years ago, permanently silencing the last witness to Grey Wolf operations that had become politically inconvenient. As she settled into the SUV's leather seat, Loisa Fowler began planning for a very different kind of conversation than the one Agent Kane was expecting. The SUV's interior was designed for prisoner transport, though Kane's team had made an effort to disguise it. The windows were heavily tinted, the door handles had been disabled from the inside, and a reinforced barrier separated the rear compartment from the front seats. But what caught Loisa's attention were the subtle modifications that standard federal vehicles didn't carry: electromagnetic shielding to prevent electronic surveillance, sound-dampening materials that would muffle gunshots, and anchor points for restraints that could hold someone with advanced escape training. As they pulled away from Fowler's garage, Loisa watched Cedar Falls disappear through the darkened glass. Mrs. Patterson would return that afternoon, expecting her Chevrolet to be ready. Father Santos had scheduled his Honda for a tune-up tomorrow morning. The ordinary rhythm of small-town life would continue, but without the woman who'd been quietly holding pieces of it together for 8 years. Kane settled into the seat across from her, tablet in hand, studying her with the clinical detachment of someone conducting a psychological evaluation. "The facial reconstruction was excellent work," he said conversationally. "Dr. Rebecca Martinez in Guadalajara, we know she's done classified work for various agencies. Expensive, but worth it for someone who needed to disappear completely." Loisa kept her expression neutral, but the mention of Dr. Martinez confirmed her worst suspicions. The plastic surgeon had specialized in identity transformations for intelligence operatives, and her patient records were supposed to be sealed under international medical privacy laws. Kane's access to those files meant his investigation had official backing at the highest levels. "According to Dr. Martinez's notes," Kane continued, "you paid an untraceable cryptocurrency and requested modifications that would defeat both facial recognition software and human identification by former associates. Very thorough, very expensive, very illegal for someone who was supposed to be dead." The countryside rolled past the SUV's windows-dense Oregon forests that could conceal almost anything. They were heading southeast, away from Portland's federal facilities and toward the kind of remote locations where conversations happened without witnesses or oversight. "The interesting question," Kane said, "is how a dead sergeant acquired the resources for such extensive identity reconstruction. Grey Wolf operatives didn't exactly retire with generous pension packages." Loisa finally spoke. "Maybe she had life insurance." Kane smiled at the deflection. Sergeant Lisa Chun did have life insurance. $50,000 paid to her sister in Sacramento. "We've spoken with Jennifer Chun extensively. She has no idea her sister is still alive, and she's been living a quiet life as a pediatric nurse for the past decade." The casual mention of her sister sent ice through Loisa's veins. Jennifer had been the only family member who'd known about her military service, though not the classified details. The threat was clear. Kane's people had leverage over everyone she'd ever cared about. "Jennifer thinks her sister died heroically in Afghanistan," Kane continued. "We've maintained that fiction because it serves our purposes. But if circumstances change, if certain people become uncooperative, that narrative could be revised. Tragic stories about military personnel going rogue, betraying their country for foreign money, those stories tend to destroy families even after death." Loisa's hands remained steady in her lap, but her mind was cataloging these UV's interior for weapons and weaknesses. The operative with the scarred knuckles was driving, while his partner rode shotgun. Both were alert, but not expecting trouble. From a supposedly retired sergeant who'd spent 8 years fixing pickup trucks. "Tell me about the training camp," she said. Kane swiped to a new series of images on his tablet. Established 18 months ago on private land outside Bend. Officially, it was registered as a survival training school for outdoor enthusiasts. Unofficially, it was teaching advanced military tactics to civilians with questionable backgrounds. The photos showed sophisticated facilities, shoot houses for close-quarters combat training, rappelling towers, obstacle courses designed to simulate urban warfare environments. Someone had invested serious money and possessed detailed knowledge of special operations training methods. 43 students over 18 months, Kane continued, all paying premium rates for instruction that included weapons training, surveillance techniques, infiltration methods, and extraction procedures. Exactly the skill set that Grey Wolf developed for deep cover operations. Loisa studied the tactical diagrams visible in the photographs. The training progression was familiar. It followed the same methodology she'd learned during her own Grey Wolf indoctrination. But there were modifications, improvements that suggested someone with extensive field experience had refined the techniques. The students were carefully selected, Kane said. Private military contractors, former law enforcement, people with specialized skills and flexible ethics. The kind of individuals who could disappear into hostile territory and accomplish objectives that regular military forces couldn't touch. "Sounds like someone was building their own private army," Loisa observed. "That's our assessment. The question is whether they were building it for domestic or international operations." Kane swiped to surveillance photos of the training camp students. Loisa recognized the type immediately. Hard-faced men and women with the bearing of former military personnel who'd found civilian life insufficiently challenging. Some showed obvious signs of combat experience, scars, prosthetics, the hyper-alert body language of people who'd survived situations where others hadn't. 2 weeks ago, the camp shut down overnight, Kane continued. Buildings emptied, equipment removed, all personnel vanished. Very professional extraction that left minimal forensic evidence. But they made one mistake. He showed her a photograph of a wall covered with instructional materials. In the center, mounted like a shrine, was a blown-up copy of Sergeant Lisa Chun's official military portrait. Around it were tactical diagrams, operational photographs, and handwritten notes analyzing Grey Wolf techniques. "Someone was using your reputation as their credential," Kane said. Students were told they were learning from materials developed by the legendary Lisa Chun, the Grey Wolf operative who'd never failed a mission, never left a team member behind, never been captured or compromised. Loisa felt a chill that had nothing to do with the SUV's air conditioning. "Legendary? Your Grey Wolf service record is impressive, Sergeant. 6 years, 43 classified operations, 0 mission failures. You extracted diplomats from Mogadishu, eliminated weapon dealers in Eastern Europe, gathered intelligence that prevented terrorist attacks across 3 continents. You were Grey Wolf's most successful deep cover operative." The recitation of her service record felt surreal after 8 years of oil changes and brake repairs. That woman, Sergeant Lisa Chun, felt like someone she'd known long ago, a character from a movie she'd watched once and barely remembered. "But your most significant operation," Kane continued, "was also your last. Operation Nightfall in Syria. Do you remember Syria, Sergeant?" The question hit like a physical blow. Syria had been the operation that ended everything, the mission. Where Grey Wolf's perfect record had finally cracked. Where classified objectives had collided with moral reality, where Sergeant Lisa Chun had made the decision that forced her to die officially and disappear completely. "I remember a lot of operations," Loisa said carefully. Kane's expression hardened. "Syria is why we're having this conversation. Syria is why someone built a training camp using your techniques. Syria is why you've spent 8 years hiding in a small town, pretending to be someone else. The SUV turned onto a gravel road that disappeared into dense forest. They were definitely not heading to an official federal facility. This was the kind of location where conversations happened off the books, where people provided information through methods that couldn't be used in court. The Syrian operation involved a weapons cache that was supposed to be destroyed, Kane said. High-tech military equipment that had fallen into rebel hands. Grey Wolf's mission was to locate the cache, neutralize the rebels guarding it, and ensure the weapons were permanently eliminated. Loisa's memory of Syria was crystal clear, despite 8 years of trying to forget it. The weapons cache had been real, but the rebels guarding it hadn't been enemy combatants. They'd been teenagers recruited by desperation and ideology, armed with equipment they barely understood, led by adults who'd used them as human shields. According to official reports, Kane continued, the mission was successful. Weapons destroyed, hostile forces neutralized, objectives accomplished. Sergeant Lisa Chun was killed during extraction when her helicopter was shot down. End of story. Except that's not what happened, Loisa said quietly. Kane leaned forward, his casual demeanor replaced by intense focus. Tell me what really happened. In Syria, Sergeant. The gravel road ended at a chain-link gate marked with warnings about private property and authorized personnel only. Beyond the gate, Loisa could see buildings that looked like a corporate retreat center, but felt like something much more dangerous. As the SUV passed through the gate, Loisa realized that Kane's interrogation wasn't about unauthorized training, camps, or identity theft. It was about Syria and the classified operation that had officially never happened, but had apparently created consequences that were still rippling through the intelligence community 8 years later. The vehicle stopped in front of a low building surrounded by surveillance cameras and motion sensors. Kane closed his tablet and looked at her with something that might have been respect. Welcome to Blackwater Station, Sergeant. This is where we're going to discuss what you really saw in Syria, who you might have told about it, and why someone is now using that information to build a private army that could threaten national security. As operatives emerged from the building to escort her inside, Loisa understood that her 8 years of peaceful anonymity were over. The woman who'd fixed cars and listened to small-town problems was about to confront the classified legacy of Sergeant Lisa Chun and discover that some operations never really end. They just wait in the shadows for the right moment to resurface and demand a final accounting. Blackwater Station looked like a corporate training facility from the outside. Modern buildings arranged around a central courtyard, professional landscaping, and discreet signage that suggested legitimate business operations. But Loisa's trained eye caught the details that revealed its true nature. Guard towers disguised as communication arrays, reinforced glass that could stop rifle rounds, and motion sensors positioned to create overlapping fields of detection around the entire perimeter. The interior confirmed her suspicions. The hallways were too wide for civilian architecture, designed to prevent choke points during armed confrontations. The lighting was positioned to eliminate shadows where someone might hide. Even the carpet was commercial-grade material that wouldn't retain forensic evidence. Kane escorted her through a maze of corridors that seemed designed to confuse visitors and prevent unauthorized access to sensitive areas. They passed doors marked with alphanumeric codes rather than department names, conference rooms with windows that had been painted black, and offices where people worked at computers displaying information she couldn't see but recognized as classified by their body language. Impressive facility, Loisa observed. Not exactly standard government issue. Blackwater Station serves specialized purposes, Kane replied. We handle situations that require discretion and flexibility that traditional federal agencies can't provide. They stopped at a door marked simply Conference Room 7. Kane's keycard opened electronic locks with the soft beep of high-security access control. Inside, the room was stark and functional. A metal table, 4 chairs, cameras mounted in corners that couldn't be avoided, and sound-dampening materials that would prevent electronic surveillance from outside. 2 people were already waiting. The first was a woman in her 50s wearing a conservative business suit that couldn't quite conceal the shoulder holster beneath her jacket. Her gray hair was pulled back in a severe bun, and her pale blue eyes studied Loisa with the cold assessment of someone accustomed to making life and death decisions about other people. The second person made Loisa's blood run cold. Colonel James Mitchell had been her commanding officer during the final year of Gray Wolf operations, the man who'd briefed her on Operation Nightfall and signed the orders that had officially resulted in her death. He looked older now, with more gray in his hair and deeper lines around his eyes, but his presence confirmed that this interrogation involved the highest levels of military intelligence. "Sergeant Chun," Mitchell said, using her real name with the authority of someone who'd never accepted her civilian identity. "It's been a long time." Loisa remained standing despite Kane's gesture toward a chair. "Colonel Mitchell, I thought you'd retired. I thought you were dead," he replied. Imagine my surprise when intelligence analysis suggested otherwise. The woman in the business suit consulted a tablet before speaking. "I'm Director Sarah Walsh, Defense Intelligence Agency. We've been tracking unusual activities that appear connected to classified Gray Wolf operations. Your name has surfaced in contexts that concern national security." Kane activated a recording device at the center of the table. "This interview is being conducted under the authority of Executive Order 12,333, regarding intelligence activities. Sergeant Chun, you are not under arrest, but you are required to answer questions truthfully regarding matters of national security." Loisa finally took a seat, recognizing the legal framework they were using. Executive Order 12,333 gave intelligence agencies broad authority to detain and question former operatives about classified activities. Refusing to cooperate would result in immediate arrest under the Espionage Act. "Before we discuss Syria, Director," Walsh said, "we need to understand your activities since officially leaving military service. How did you acquire the resources to establish a new identity?" The question was a trap. Any truthful answer would implicate her in activities that were technically illegal, while lying during a national security interview carried severe penalties. "I had savings," Loisa said carefully. Colonel Mitchell leaned forward. "Sergeant Chun, your military pay records show total compensation of approximately $300,000 over 6 years of service. The identity reconstruction you underwent cost at least $500,000, not including ongoing maintenance of your civilian cover. Where did the additional funds come from?" The room was silent except for the hum of ventilation systems and the soft whir of recording equipment. Loisa realized they already knew the answer. This was a test of her willingness to cooperate honestly. "Operation Nightfall," she said quietly. Director Walsh exchanged glances with the 2 men. "Explain." Loisa took a deep breath, returning mentally to a desert compound 8 years ago where everything had gone wrong. The Syrian weapons cache contained more than military equipment. There was a safe with approximately $2 million in untraceable currency payment for arms deals that never happened because we interrupted them. "And you took the money," Kane stated. "I secured the money," Loisa corrected. "According to standing orders, all enemy assets were to be collected for intelligence analysis. The cache was enemy assets." Colonel Mitchell's expression was unreadable. "But you never reported the money to your handlers." "My handlers were dead," Loisa replied, the words carrying 8 years of suppressed anger. "The entire extraction team was dead. The mission had been compromised from the beginning, and I was the only Gray Wolf operative who survived to collect anything." Director Walsh consulted her tablet. "According to official reports, Operation Nightfall was successful. Weapons destroyed. Hostile forces neutralized. Extraction completed without casualties, except for your own heroic sacrifice. The official reports were fiction, Loisa said flatly, designed to cover up the fact that someone had sold Grey Wolf's operational details to enemy forces. We walked into a trap that killed 8 good soldiers because someone in the command structure was feeding information to arms dealers. The room temperature seemed to drop several degrees. Kane stopped the recording device and looked at Colonel Mitchell, who nodded grimly. "Sergeant Chun," Mitchell said carefully, "those are serious allegations. Do you have evidence to support them?" Loisa smiled without humor. "I survived, Colonel. That's evidence enough. The Syrian rebels knew exactly when and where we were coming. They had detailed intelligence about our equipment, our tactics, our extraction timeline. They were waiting for us with equipment that should have been impossible for irregular forces to acquire." She stood up and moved to the window, looking out at the forest surrounding Blackwater Station. The weapons cache we were supposed to destroy, it was bait. High-tech military equipment left in an obvious location to draw Grey Wolf into a kill box. Someone wanted us eliminated, and they used Syrian arms dealers to do their dirty work. Director Walsh leaned back in her chair. "If that's true, why didn't you report it through official channels?" "Because I didn't know who to trust," Loisa replied. The operation had been briefed to exactly 7 people in the command structure. 5 of them were dead within 6 months of Syria car accidents, heart attacks, training accidents. Very convenient accidents. Kane reactivated the recording device. "You're suggesting a conspiracy within Grey Wolf leadership." "I'm stating facts," Loisa said. "Someone was selling classified operational intelligence to foreign buyers. When Grey Wolf operatives became liabilities, they were eliminated. Syria was supposed to be my elimination, but I survived because I don't follow orders that don't make tactical sense." Colonel Mitchell's face had gone pale. "Sergeant, you're describing a betrayal at the highest levels of military intelligence." "Yes, sir, I am." Director Walsh consulted her tablet again. "The training camp outside Bend, someone was teaching Grey Wolf techniques to civilians." "You believe this is connected to the Syrian conspiracy?" Loisa nodded. "Someone has been monetizing classified military training methods. The same someone who tried to eliminate Grey Wolf operatives 8 years ago. They're building a private army using our techniques, probably for the same foreign buyers who set up the Syrian trap." "And you've spent 8 years hiding in Oregon, waiting for what?" Kane asked. "Waiting for them to make a mistake," Loisa replied. "Waiting for evidence that would prove what happened in Syria. Waiting for justice." She turned back to face the 3 interrogators. "The training camp was their mistake. Using my photograph, my reputation, my operational methods, they got greedy. They thought I was safely dead and couldn't interfere with their operations." Director Walsh closed her tablet. "Sergeant Chun, if your allegations are correct, we're dealing with a threat to national security that extends far beyond unauthorized training camps." "If my allegations are correct," Loisa said, "then some of the people in this room might be working for the enemy." The statement hung in the air like a live grenade. Kane's hand moved instinctively toward his sidearm before he caught himself. Colonel Mitchell's jaw tightened. Director Walsh's expression became completely unreadable. "That's a very dangerous accusation," Mitchell said quietly. "Colonel," Loisa replied, 8 years ago, I was supposed to die in Syria because I knew too much about classified operations. Today, I'm sitting in an unofficial facility being questioned about the same operations by people who have access to intelligence that should have been destroyed. Either Grey Wolf security was completely compromised, or someone in this room has been feeding information to unauthorized parties." She moved toward the door, testing whether they would try to stop her. "The question is, are we going to work together to identify the real threat, Or are you going to eliminate the last witness to Operation Nightfall? The silence stretched between them, heavy with implications and unspoken threats. Finally, Director Walsh spoke. Sergeant Chun, we're going to continue this conversation. But first, we need to show you something that might change your perspective on recent events. Kane opened the door and gestured for her to follow. The training camp investigation uncovered information that suggests your Syrian conspiracy theory might be more accurate than we initially believed. And unfortunately, the threat is more immediate than any of us realized. Director Walsh led them through a maze of corridors to a secure elevator that required both keycard access and biometric scanning. As they descended 3 floors below ground level, Loisa noted the increasing sophistication of the security measures. This wasn't just a classified facility. It was a bunker designed to survive direct attack. The elevator opened onto a high-tech operations center that looked like something from a spy thriller. Wall-mounted displays showed satellite feeds, communication intercepts, and real-time intelligence data from around the globe. Analysts worked at workstations equipped with multiple monitors, their conversations conducted in the hushed tones of people handling information that could start or prevent wars. "Welcome to the Grey Wolf Memorial Intelligence Center, Director," Walsh said with bitter irony. "We've been tracking the conspiracy you described for the past 3 years." Kane gestured toward a large display showing a network analysis diagram. Names, photographs, and connecting lines created a web of relationships that spanned multiple countries and organizations. At the center of the web was a photograph that made Loisa's blood run cold. General Robert Harrison had been Grey Wolf's program director, the man who'd created the unit, selected its operatives, and overseen its most sensitive operations. According to official records, he died in a helicopter crash 18 months after Operation Nightfall. But the photograph on the display showed him very much alive, taken at what appeared to be a luxury resort within the past year. "General Harrison didn't die in that helicopter crash," Director Walsh explained. "He staged his death and disappeared with classified intelligence that he's been selling to the highest bidders ever since." Loisa studied the network diagram, recognizing some of the connected names from her Grey Wolf service. "How long have you known?" "We suspected something was wrong when former Grey Wolf operatives started dying in suspicious accidents," Colonel Mitchell replied. "But we didn't have proof until 18 months ago, when financial intelligence identified unusual money transfers connected to arms-dealing networks." Kane pointed to a section of the display showing financial transactions. "Harrison has been operating under multiple identities, selling classified military training techniques to private military companies, drug cartels, and terrorist organizations. The training camp outside Bend was just one of at least 12 facilities worldwide. The scope of the betrayal was staggering. Harrison hadn't just sold out individual operations, he'd monetized the entire Grey Wolf program, turning classified military techniques into a profitable enterprise that threatened global security. The Syrian operation, Loisa said, pieces clicking into place. He set us up to eliminate witnesses who might have discovered his activities. That's our assessment, Director Walsh confirmed. Harrison needed Grey Wolf operatives dead because you were the only people who could identify him as the source of intelligence leaks. Syria was supposed to eliminate the entire team in a way that looked like operational casualties. A new photograph appeared on the display. A man in his 40s with military bearing, and the kind of expensive clothes that suggested serious money. Loisa recognized him immediately. "Marcus Kane," she said, looking at the real Kane standing beside her. "That's not you." The man who'd introduced himself as Agent Kane smiled grimly. "I'm Major David Rodriguez, Army Criminal Investigation Division. The real Marcus Kane has been dead for 2 years, murdered by Harrison's people when he got too close to exposing the network." The revelation that her primary interrogator had been using a false identity shifted Loisa's entire understanding of the situation. If Rodriguez was military seed, this wasn't just about national security, it was about bringing Harrison and his network to justice through official military channels. We've been using Kane's identity to infiltrate Harrison's operations, Director Walsh explained. Our investigation has identified his network, his buyers, and his training facilities. But we need one final piece of evidence to build a case that will hold up in court. Colonel Mitchell activated a new display showing satellite imagery of a compound in what appeared to be mountainous desert terrain. Harrison is planning a major sale classified information about current Special Forces operations to a consortium of hostile intelligence services. The transaction is scheduled for tomorrow night at a facility in Nevada. You want me to help you stop it, Loisa said. We want you to help us capture Harrison alive, Rodriguez clarified. You're the only surviving Grey Wolf operative who can positively identify him and testify about the classified techniques he's been selling. Loisa studied the satellite images, automatically analyzing the compound's defenses and tactical challenges. What's the operational framework? Director Walsh smiled, the first genuine expression Loisa had seen from her. Infiltration and extraction, your specialty. A detailed tactical briefing appeared on the main display. The Nevada compound was HEAVILY fortified, with multiple layers of security and defensive positions that would make a direct assault extremely costly. But there were vulnerabilities, service entrances, communication links, and patrol patterns that could be exploited by someone with the right training. Harrison's buyer is a Russian intelligence operative named Viktor Petrov, Rodriguez explained. They're meeting to transfer operational details about 3 current Special Forces missions in Eastern Europe. If that information reaches Russian military intelligence, American soldiers will die. The personal stakes were becoming clear. This wasn't just about justice for past betrayals. It was about preventing future casualties among soldiers who were currently in the field, relying on operational security that Harrison was about to destroy for profit. What makes you think I'll cooperate? Loisa asked. Colonel Mitchell's expression became grave. Because Harrison knows you're alive. Your appearance at the training camp investigation triggered security protocols that alerted his network. As of this morning, there's a contract on your life, $2 million for proof of your death. The operations center fell silent except for the hum of computer equipment and the distant sound of ventilation systems. Loisa processed the implications. Her 8 years of careful anonymity were over regardless of what she decided. Harrison's people would hunt her whether she helped with the operation or tried to disappear again. There's more, Director Walsh added. Harrison has been tracking your civilian identity for months. He knows about Cedar Falls, knows about your garage, knows about the people you've been protecting. A new display showed surveillance photographs of Cedar Falls taken with telephoto lenses. Sheriff Bradley outside the diner, Mrs. Patterson at the post office, Father Santos leaving the church, Sarah Chun locking up the high school. All the people who'd become important to Loisa during her years as a civilian mechanic. He's using them as leverage, Rodriguez said quietly. Cooperate with his elimination, or watch your civilian friends pay the price for harboring a fugitive operative. The threat was clear and credible. Harrison had the resources and ruthlessness to follow through on such promises. The quiet people of Cedar Falls would become collateral damage in a war they didn't know existed. Loisa moved to a workstation and began studying the tactical displays in detail. The compound's layout, security measures, patrol schedules, communication systems, all the information needed to plan an infiltration mission. Her fingers moved across the keyboard with the automatic efficiency of someone returning to familiar work. Insertion method? She asked. Hello, jump from 30,000 feet, Rodriguez replied. Nighttime approach, minimal radar signature. Extraction? Helicopter pickup at a designated rally point, assuming you successfully capture Harrison. and escape the compound with him alive. Timeline: 18 hours to mission launch. Loisa continued analyzing the intelligence data, her mind shifting into operational mode for the first time in 8 years. The compound was challenging but not impossible, the kind of target Gray Wolf had specialized in penetrating when conventional forces couldn't be used. "I'll need specialized equipment," she said. Director Walsh gestured toward another section of the operations center. "We have everything Gray Wolf used, plus some improvements developed since the program ended. And if I refuse?" Colonel Mitchell's expression was sympathetic but implacable. "Then you'd disappear into federal protective custody while Harrison's people eliminate everyone in Cedar Falls who might have information about your activities." "Your choice, Sergeant." It wasn't really a choice at all. Harrison had made it impossible for her to walk away by threatening innocent people who'd shown her kindness during the most vulnerable period of her life. The mechanic who'd fixed their cars and listened to their problems couldn't abandon them to face consequences for her past. "I'll need a secure communication link to Cedar Falls," Loisa said. "Sheriff Bradley needs to know there might be trouble coming." "Already arranged," Rodriguez replied. "We've briefed local law enforcement and positioned federal assets to protect civilian targets." Loisa stood up from the workstation. "Decision made. When do we start mission planning?" Director Walsh checked her watch. "Now we have 17 hours to prepare for an operation that will either end Harrison's network forever or result in the deaths of multiple American soldiers currently in the field." As they moved toward the mission planning area, Loisa caught sight of her reflection in a darkened monitor. The face looking back at her wasn't that of a small-town mechanic anymore. After 8 years of civilian life, Sergeant Lisa Chun was returning to active duty, and this time, the mission was personal. The equipment room at Blackwater Station looked like a museum of military technology spanning 3 decades. Tactical gear hung in precise arrangements, weapons were secured in climate-controlled cases, and electronic equipment represented the cutting edge of surveillance and communication technology. But what caught Loisa's attention were the items specifically designed for Gray Wolf operations, equipment that officially didn't exist. Asterisk. Rodriguez guided her through the inventory with the pride of someone who'd spent considerable effort acquiring items that weren't supposed to be available to anyone outside the most classified programs. "We've maintained stockpiles of Gray Wolf equipment in case former operatives ever needed to return to active duty," he explained. Loisa examined a tactical suit made from materials she didn't recognize, lighter than Kevlar, but apparently offering superior protection, with integrated electronic systems that could monitor vital signs, environmental conditions, and tactical communications. The suit would allow her to operate in hostile territory while providing real-time intelligence to support personnel. "New development since your active service," Director Walsh noted. "Synthetic muscle fibers that enhance strength and endurance, reactive camouflage that adapts to environmental conditions, and built-in medical systems that can treat traumatic injuries automatically." The weapon selection included items that pushed the boundaries of legal military equipment. Silenced firearms with ammunition designed to penetrate body armor while minimizing the risk of over-penetration. Non-lethal weapons that could incapacitate targets without causing permanent injury. Electronic warfare devices that could disable security systems, communication networks, and surveillance equipment from a distance. "Harrison's compound will have state-of-the-art security," Rodriguez warned. "Motion sensors, thermal imaging, automated defensive systems. Standard infiltration techniques won't be sufficient." Loisa selected equipment with the methodical precision of someone who understood that her life would depend on each choice. Communication devices that could maintain contact through electronic jamming. Lockpicking tools that could defeat both mechanical and electronic security systems. Climbing gear designed for rapid Vertical movement in hostile environments. The most impressive item was a tablet computer that contained detailed intelligence about Harrison's operations gathered over 3 years of investigation. Financial records, communication intercepts, facility blueprints, personnel files, everything needed to understand the network she'd be infiltrating. We've identified 43 people directly involved in Harrison's organization, Director Walsh explained as Loisa reviewed the files. Former military personnel, private security contractors, and criminal specialists. All highly trained, all willing to kill to protect their operation. The personnel files painted a picture of a sophisticated criminal organization that combined military expertise with ruthless business practices. Harrison had recruited people with specialized skills from around the world, offering them financial compensation that legitimate employment couldn't match. Viktor Petrov, the Russian buyer, will arrive at the compound tomorrow afternoon with his own security team, Rodriguez added. Spetsnaz veterans, probably armed with equipment that technically violates several international treaties. Loisa studied satellite imagery of the Nevada compound, memorizing terrain features, building layouts, and defensive positions. The facility was built into a mountainside, with natural barriers that limited approach routes and man-made fortifications that could withstand significant assault. Primary objective is Harrison's capture, she said, running through tactical options. Secondary objectives? Intelligence recovery, Director Walsh replied. Harrison has been maintaining detailed records of his operations client lists, financial transactions, operational plans. That information could expose intelligence networks across multiple countries. And if capture isn't possible? The room fell silent. Colonel Mitchell finally spoke, his voice carrying the weight of someone who'd made similar decisions during his military career. Then we ensure Harrison never completes another transaction, by any means necessary. The authorization for lethal force wasn't surprising, but it represented a significant escalation from her civilian life. 8 years of fixing engines and solving mechanical problems had softened some of the mental conditioning that made killing feel routine. She'd need to readjust to the psychological demands of combat operations. Timeline for infiltration? Loisa asked. Rodriguez consulted a mission planning tablet. You'll insert at 0200 hours, giving you 4 hours to penetrate the compound and locate Harrison before Petrov's arrival at 0600. The exchange is scheduled for 0800, which gives us a 2-hour window for capture and extraction. Contingency plans. If the timeline slips, multiple extraction points with helicopter support on standby, Director Walsh replied. But if you're not at the primary rally point by 1000 hours, we assume mission failure and initiate containment protocols. Containment protocols meant destroying the compound and everyone in it to prevent classified information from reaching Russian intelligence. Loisa would become acceptable casualties in service of the larger objective, a calculation she understood but didn't particularly appreciate. The mission briefing continued for 6 hours, covering every aspect of the operation, from infiltration routes to emergency medical procedures. Loisa found herself slipping back into the mental framework of operational planning, thinking in terms of probability matrices and risk assessments rather than the straightforward problem-solving that had defined her civilian life. During a break in the briefing, Rodriguez approached her with a secure satellite phone. "Call from Cedar Falls," he said quietly. Sheriff Bradley's voice was tense but controlled. "Lou, we've got a situation developing here. Strangers in town asking questions about you, federal agents setting up surveillance positions, and people are starting to panic." Loisa felt a pang of guilt for the disruption her past had brought to the peaceful community. "Tom, I need you to trust me on this. The federal agents are there to protect people, not cause trouble. Keep everyone calm and follow their instructions." "What the hell is going on?" Bradley asked. Mrs. Patterson is convinced the FBI is going to arrest her for tax evasion, and Father Santos thinks we're being invaded by terrorists. It's complicated, Loisa replied, but it should be over within 48 hours. Just keep people safe and away from the garage until then. Lou, Bradley's voice carried the concern of someone who genuinely worried about her safety. Whatever you're involved in, be careful. This town needs you back in one piece. The conversation ended, leaving Loisa with a renewed sense of what was at stake. The people of Cedar Falls had become her family in ways that surprised her. The thought of Harrison's people threatening them added personal motivation to what was already a critical national security operation. As evening approached, the mission team gathered for final preparations. The aircraft that would deliver her to the Nevada compound was a stealth transport that looked like something from a science fiction movie. Angular surfaces designed to deflect radar, engines that produced minimal noise signature, and electronic systems that could spoof enemy detection equipment. Halo insertion from 30,000 feet, the pilot briefed her. Weather conditions are optimal, with cloud cover that will conceal your approach. Winds are within acceptable parameters for precision landing. Loisa checked her parachute equipment with practiced efficiency, running through safety procedures that had been drilled into her during Grey Wolf training. The specialized chute was designed for high-altitude operations, with steering capabilities that would allow her to land within meters of her target, despite jumping from 6 miles above the ground. Communications check, Rodriguez said, testing the encrypted radio system built into her tactical suit. We'll maintain contact throughout the operation, but if you're compromised, RDIO silence is authorized to protect mission security. The final briefing covered exfiltration procedures, medical support, and rules of engagement. Harrison's compound would be considered hostile territory, with authorization to use lethal force against anyone who threatened mission success or operator safety. As midnight approached, Loisa stood in the equipment room wearing the tactical suit that would protect her during the most dangerous operation of her career. The woman who'd spent 8 years fixing pickup trucks and listening to small-town problems was gone, replaced by the Grey Wolf operative who'd never failed a mission. Psychological assessment? Director Walsh asked a final check to ensure Loisa was mentally prepared for combat operations. Ready for deployment, Loisa replied, using the official phraseology that indicated full operational readiness. Rodriguez handed her a small device that looked like a garage door opener. Insurance policy, he explained. If the mission goes completely wrong, if Harrison escapes or you're compromised beyond recovery, press this button. It will initiate a kinetic strike that eliminates the entire compound. The weight of the device in her palm was insignificant, but its implications were enormous. She was being authorized to call down military destruction that would kill everyone in the area, including herself if necessary. It was the kind of responsibility that Grey Wolf operatives had carried routinely, but which felt overwhelming after years of civilian life. Understood, she said, securing the device in a reinforced pocket of her tactical suit. As the mission team moved toward the aircraft that would carry her to Nevada, Loisa caught sight of her reflection in a window. The face looking back was that of someone she'd thought was dead Sergeant Lisa Chun, ready to complete the mission that had started 8 years ago in a Syrian desert. The engine spooled up with a sound like distant thunder, and Loisa stepped aboard the aircraft that would deliver her into the heart of enemy territory. In 6 hours, she would either capture the man who'd betrayed Grey Wolf and threatened everything she'd built in Cedar Falls, or she would die trying to prevent classified American military secrets from reaching hostile intelligence services. Either way, the quiet mechanic who'd fixed cars and listened to problems was gone forever, replaced by someone who understood that some fights were too important to lose. At 30,000 feet above the Nevada desert, The world looked like an abstract painting rendered in shades of black and silver. Stars burned with crystalline clarity. In the thin atmosphere, while far below, the lights of Las Vegas created a distant glow on the horizon. The stealth transport aircraft moved through the night sky like a ghost, its engines producing barely more sound than the wind itself. Loisa stood at the aircraft's open cargo door, checking her equipment one final time while the loadmaster ran through jump procedures. The tactical suit's environmental systems were maintaining perfect temperature control despite the sub-zero conditions at altitude, and the heads-up display built into her helmet visor showed green indicators for all critical systems. 2 minutes. To drop zone, the pilot's voice crackled through her comm system. Weather conditions remain optimal, with cloud cover providing concealment for your descent. Through her night vision equipment, Loisa could see the Nevada mountains rising like black teeth against the star-filled sky. Somewhere in those peaks, Harrison's compound waited, a fortress built with stolen military funds and defended by people who'd killed to protect their criminal enterprise. Final equipment check. Rodriguez's voice came through the encrypted communication link. All systems showing green from our end. Loisa verified her primary and backup parachutes, tested the electronic systems integrated into her tactical suit, and confirmed that her weapons were secure but accessible. The specialized equipment that would allow her to penetrate the compound's defenses was distributed across multiple attachment points, balanced to avoid affecting her aerodynamics during the high-altitude descent. 30 seconds, the loadmaster announced. Remember, you own the sky until you hit the ground. After that, you're in enemy territory. The Nevada desert stretched endlessly below, broken only by the occasional road or isolated building. In that vast emptiness, Harrison had built his criminal empire, selling American military secrets to anyone willing to pay his prices. The compound she was about to infiltrate represented 8 years of betrayal and murder, and she was the only person alive who could identify him with certainty. 10 seconds. Stand by. Loisa moved to the door's edge, feeling the familiar rush of adrenaline. That preceded high-risk operations. 8 years of civilian life had changed her in many ways, but the fundamental skills remained: the ability to function under extreme stress, to make life-and-death decisions in seconds, to accomplish objectives that seemed impossible to anyone. Lacking specialized training. Go. She stepped into empty space, immediately entering free fall at terminal velocity. The aircraft disappeared above her, its stealth systems making it invisible against the star field. For the first minute of descent, she was completely alone. No radio contact, no navigation assistance, just the fundamental physics of gravity and aerodynamics. The tactical suit's altimeter counted down her descent: 25,000 feet, 20,000, 15,000. At 10,000 feet, she would deploy her main chute and begin the precision approach to Harrison's compound. Until then, she fell through the darkness like a human meteor, invisible to ground-based detection systems. At 12,000 feet, her communication system crackled back to life as she descended into range of the support team's equipment. Angel 1, this is Control. We have you on scope and tracking nominal descent profile. Control Angel 1, all systems green, approaching. Deployment altitude. Her voice was steady despite the adrenaline coursing through her system. Some responses were so deeply ingrained that they emerged automatically, regardless of how long she'd been away from operational duty. At 10,000 feet, she deployed her main parachute, feeling the sudden deceleration as the specially designed canopy caught the air. The silence of free fall was replaced by the soft whisper of wind through parachute lines, and her descent slowed to a manageable rate that would allow precision navigation to the target through her night vision equipment. She could now see individual buildings within Harrison's compound. The intelligence briefings had been accurate. The facility was built into a natural depression in the mountains. with defensive positions that commanded excellent fields of fire against conventional assault. But those same positions created blind spots that could be exploited by someone approaching from directly above. Angel 1, you are cleared hot for final approach. Target compound bears 090 degrees, range 800 meters. Loisa adjusted her parachute steering toggles, guiding her descent toward a rocky outcropping approximately 200 meters from the compound's outer perimeter. The landing zone would provide concealment while allowing her to observe the facility's security measures before beginning her infiltration. As she descended through the final 1,000 feet, details of the compound became clearly visible. Guard towers at each corner, patrol routes marked by moving lights, and vehicle checkpoints that could stop conventional ground assault. But she also noted weaknesses, areas where natural terrain limited visibility, service entrances that appeared less heavily defended, and communication antennas that could be targeted to disrupt coordination. Her feet touched rocky ground with barely a sound, the advanced parachute technology allowing for an almost silent landing. She immediately collapsed and secured the chute, then activated the suit's camouflage systems. Within seconds, she was nearly invisible against the desert terrain, protected by reactive materials that matched the surrounding environment. Angel 1 on the ground, she whispered into her comm system. Beginning reconnaissance phase. From her position on the rocky outcropping, Loisa could observe the compound's nighttime operations through her helmet's enhanced optics. Security was professional but predictable patrols following established routes, guards maintaining standard communication schedules, defensive positions manned by personnel who showed good training but limited imagination. The compound itself was larger than the satellite images had suggested, with multiple buildings connected by covered walkways that would provide protection against aerial surveillance. The main structure was built directly into the mountainside, with what appeared to be extensive underground facilities that could house both personnel and sensitive equipment. Control. Angel 1. Compound security consists of approximately 20 personnel in 6-man patrol teams. Standard military formation, probably ex-special forces, but showing routine-based thinking rather than adaptive tactics. Copy that, Angel 1. Be advised, thermal imaging shows additional heat signatures in underground areas. Estimate total personnel count at 40+ individuals. The number was higher than expected, but not outside the parameters she'd trained. For during Grey Wolf operations, large facilities required significant manpower for security, maintenance, and operational support. The key would be avoiding detection until she could locate Harrison and determine the scope of his intelligence transfer to the Russians. Moving with the silent efficiency that had made her Grey Wolf's most successful deep cover operative, Loisa began her approach to the compound's outer perimeter. The tactical suit's noise-dampening systems eliminated the sound of her movement, while its environmental sensors provided constant updates about potential threats. The first security checkpoint consisted of motion sensors and infrared cameras covering the main approach road. But the designers had focused on vehicle-borne threats, leaving gaps in coverage that could be exploited by someone moving on foot through the rocky terrain. She identified a route that would take her within 50 meters of the outer fence without triggering any detection systems. As she moved closer to the compound, Loisa could hear conversations between guards conducting their patrols. Professional military terminology mixed with casual discussion about pay schedules and operational assignments. These weren't ideologically motivated terrorists. They were mercenaries working for Harrison because he offered better compensation than legitimate employment. Angel 1. The advised were detecting increased communication activity within the compound. Someone may be expecting trouble. The warning from control confirmed what Loisa's instincts had been suggesting. The timing of Harrison's intelligence. Sale to the Russians wasn't coincidental. He'd accelerated the transaction because he knew his network was being investigated. This operation might be her only chance to stop him before he disappeared with enough classified information to compromise American military operations worldwide. Reaching the compound's outer fence, she deployed electronic countermeasures that created a small gap in the sensor coverage. The specialized equipment allowed her to cut through the chain-link barrier without triggering alarms, creating an entry point that would be invisible to anyone not looking for it specifically. Inside the perimeter, the facility's layout became clear. The main building housed administrative functions and personnel quarters, while smaller structures contained communications equipment, vehicle maintenance, and what appeared to be a sophisticated computer center. Underground entrances suggested extensive subterranean facilities where the most sensitive operations would be conducted. Control, Angel 1 is inside the perimeter. Beginning structure reconnaissance. Estimate 30 minutes to locate primary. Target. Copy, Angel 1. Be advised, Russian transport aircraft is ahead of schedule. ETA now 0500 hours instead of 060. Oh, you have less time than anticipated. The compressed timeline meant she couldn't conduct the methodical search she'd originally planned. Instead, she would need to locate Harrison quickly and extract him before the Russians arrived for their intelligence purchase. Failure wasn't just mission failure, it was the potential compromise of ongoing American military operations and the deaths of soldiers currently in the field. Moving through the compound's shadows, Loisa felt the familiar focus that had defined her most successful Grey Wolf operations. The quiet mechanic who'd spent 8 years fixing cars in Cedar Falls was completely gone, replaced by someone who understood that the next few hours would determine whether American military secrets remained protected or fell into hostile hands. Behind her, the Nevada desert stretched endlessly under a canopy of stars that had witnessed countless human conflicts. Ahead, inside Harrison's fortress, lay the answers to 8 years of questions and the possibility of justice for the Grey Wolf operatives who died because of his betrayal. But first, she had to survive long enough to find him in a compound filled with people who'd been paid very well to kill anyone who threatened their operation. And with the Russians arriving earlier than expected, time was running out faster than anyone had anticipated. The main building's interior was a maze of corridors, designed to confuse intruders and provide defensive advantages to anyone familiar with the layout. Loisa moved through the shadows like a ghost, her tactical suit's noise-dampening systems eliminating even the whisper of fabric against walls. The enhanced hearing built into her helmet allowed her to track conversations and footsteps through multiple rooms, creating a mental map of personnel locations. She'd been inside the compound for 23 minutes when she found what she was looking for, a heavily secured elevator that descended into the mountain's underground facilities. The access panel required both keycard and biometric authentication, but her Grey Wolf training had included techniques for bypassing security systems that were supposed to be impenetrable. The electronic warfare device she'd selected at Blackwater Station made quick work of the keycard reader, while a forensic scanner captured fingerprints from the biometric sensor surface. Within 90 seconds, she'd gained access to Harrison's inner sanctum, the underground command center where he conducted his most sensitive business. The elevator descended for what felt like an eternity, before opening onto a facility that looked like something from a military thriller. Banks of computer servers lined the walls. Multiple monitors displayed intelligence feeds from around the world, and sophisticated communication equipment connected Harrison's operation to clients across the globe. This wasn't just a criminal enterprise, it was a shadow intelligence agency operating outside any government oversight. Angel 1 to control, she whispered into her comm system. I'm inside the primary facility. This is bigger than we thought. Harrison's been operating a full-scale intelligence brokerage, not just selling stolen information. Copy that, Angel 1. How big? Loisa studied the computer displays, noting intelligence feeds from locations she recognized as current American. Military operations. He's got real-time access to classified communications, satellite imagery, operational plans. Someone's been feeding him current intelligence, not just historical Grey Wolf data. The revelation was staggering. Harrison hadn't just stolen classified information from his past. He was receiving ongoing intelligence updates from sources within the current military command structure. His criminal network had tentacles reaching into active operations, making him far more dangerous than anyone had realized. Movement in the corridor beyond the server room caught her attention. Through her helmet's enhanced optics, she could see a familiar figure approaching. General Robert Harrison himself, very much alive and apparently preparing for his meeting with the Russian buyers. He looked older than his official photographs, with gray hair and lines around his eyes that spoke of someone living under constant stress. Behind Harrison walked two men in expensive suits who carried themselves with the controlled grace of former special operations personnel. Russian intelligence operatives, almost certainly, arriving early to ensure the security of their purchase. The timeline had compressed even further. The exchange was happening now. Not in 2 hours as planned. Loisa activated the recording systems built into her tactical suit, documenting everything she could observe about the Russian operation. Names, faces, conversation fragments, all evidence that could be used to expose the network and prevent future intelligence sales. Gentlemen, Harrison's voice carried clearly through the facility's acoustics. I trust your journey was comfortable. We have much to discuss before completing our transaction. One of the Russians replied in heavily accented English. Colonel Petrov sends his regards. We are prepared to transfer payment upon verification of the intelligence packages. They were speaking about American military secrets as casually as merchants discussing commodity prices. Loisa felt the cold rage that had sustained her through the worst Grey Wolf operations. The anger of someone who'd risked everything to protect her country, only to discover that people in positions of trust were selling that protection to the highest bidders. She followed the group through the underground facility, staying in the shadows while they moved toward what appeared to be a conference room, equipped with secure communication systems. Through her helmet's directional microphones, she could hear Harrison outlining the intelligence he was offering. Current operational details for 3 special forces teams in Eastern Europe, he said. Mission parameters, personnel files, equipment specifications, and extraction protocols. Everything your people need to neutralize American assets in the region. The casual mention of neutralizing American soldiers, her former colleagues who were currently in the field, triggered something primal in Loisa's psychology. These weren't just financial crimes or political betrayals. Harrison was actively facilitating the murder of American military personnel for profit. The conference room contained a large table surrounded by chairs, with wall-mounted displays showing what appeared to be classified operational maps. Harrison activated the presentation systems, revealing detailed intelligence about ongoing missions that should have been known only to the highest levels of military command. As you can see, Harrison continued, we have complete operational awareness. Your forces will know exactly when and where to intercept American teams, with full knowledge of their capabilities and limitations. Loisa had seen enough. She activated her communication system and whispered the code phrase that would initiate the extraction protocol. Control, Angel 1, package located and confirmed hostile. Request immediate extraction support. Angel 1, extraction team is inbound, ETA 12 minutes. Can you maintain position until arrival? 12 minutes was an eternity in a hostile facility filled with armed mercenaries. But she'd accomplished the primary mission objective, locating Harrison and documenting his treasonous activities. The secondary objective, capturing him alive, would require her to move against multiple targets in a confined space. She was studying attack angles when everything went wrong. Emergency lighting flooded the underground facility, accompanied by alarm klaxons that would alert every security person in the compound. Someone had detected her presence, either through surveillance she'd missed or by discovering evidence of her infiltration route. "Intruder alert," announced a voiceover. "The facility's communication system. All personnel to defensive positions. This is not a drill." Through the conference room's glass walls, Loisa could see Harrison and the Russians, drawing weapons with the practiced efficiency of people who'd survived in dangerous professions. They weren't panicking, they were adapting to a tactical situation. With military precision. "Angel 1, we're detecting significant activity in your area. Multiple armed personnel converging on your position." Loisa checked her weapons and electronic countermeasures, calculating odds and options. She could attempt to escape before the net closed around her, but that would mean leaving Harrison free to complete his intelligence sale. American soldiers would die because she'd chosen personal survival over mission success. Alternatively, she could engage multiple targets in an enclosed space, accepting the high probability of casualties while attempting to capture or eliminate Harrison before his intelligence reached Russian hands. It was the kind of decision that defined Grey Wolf operations, accepting personal risk to accomplish objectives that seemed impossible. The choice was made for her when Harrison's voice echoed through the facility's communication system. "Lisa." "Chun," he said, using her real name with casual familiarity. "I know you're here. I've been expecting you for quite some time." The personal address meant he'd not only detected her presence, but identified her specifically. Somehow, despite 8 years of careful anonymity and advanced infiltration techniques, Harrison had been prepared for her arrival. "You can't escape," Harrison continued. "This facility is designed to contain people with your training. But we can discuss terms. Walk into the conference room with your hands visible, and we'll negotiate your survival." Loisa smiled grimly as she checked her equipment one final time. Harrison had made the same mistake that had cost him in Syria 8 years ago. He'd underestimated her willingness to accomplish the mission regardless of personal cost, moving through the facility's corridors with lethal efficiency. She began the final phase of an operation that had started in the Syrian desert and would end in the Nevada mountains. The quiet mechanic who'd fixed cars and listened to problems in Cedar Falls was gone forever. But Sergeant Lisa Chun had one last mission to complete. Behind her, alarms continued to wail while armed mercenaries searched the underground complex. Ahead, in the conference room, Harrison waited with Russian intelligence operatives who'd paid millions for American military secrets, and in her tactical suit's secure pocket, the device that could eliminate the entire compound pulsed with red light, waiting for her decision about whether some secrets were too dangerous to leave in enemy hands, even at the cost of her own life. The final confrontation between the woman who died officially 8 years ago and the man who'd betrayed everything she'd fought to protect was about to begin. And this time, only one of them would walk away alive. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hits the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.